Well, hello there, guys and gals. Welcome to Miyagi Mornings episode. Let me see here. Episode 123, for those watching the video instead of listening to the recap anyway. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin. I try to do like a Miyagi Mornings video a week that involves cryptocurrency in some way. We're going to stick to Bitcoin today. We're going to talk about maximalism a little bit, but not in the world of cryptocurrency. Gold maximalists. We'll talk about that a little bit. But what I really want to drive home to you today is why any developing nation, if you want to use that term, I don't know of a better term for it, any nation that's not, the part of the EU, China, Japan, Australia, the United States, Canada, probably leaving some people out that, they're really tied into the central banking system. And they benefit from it. And I don't mean that their people benefit from it. I mean the nation benefits from it. And anybody kind of outside that kind of traditional hegemon, I don't know, maybe South Africa goes in there, But anybody out of that should immediately, as quickly as possible, especially your smaller, poorer nations that either don't have their own currency, like El Salvador's using the dollar instead of having their own currency, or they have their own currency, but it's really so manipulated by the dollar, they might as well use the dollar, should immediately follow El Salvador's lead and adopt Bitcoin as legal tender in their country. They don't have to even get rid of whatever other currency they have. They just need to do that. And by de facto standard, it will eventually rapidly become the standard currency in their country. And I'm sure there's a lot of you that disagree, and there's a lot of you that agree, but I'm thinking even the people that agree may not follow the logic or know the reasoning behind why I would say this. It has to do with something that I think most people don't know, because you're not taught this. You're not taught this. If you have an economics degree, odds are you weren't taught this. Now, you were probably given all the information necessary to come to this conclusion on your own, but no one in a classroom, at a college or a university, what have you, ever stood up and told you what I'm about to tell you. Some of you have heard it before because you listened to my audio podcast, and you have. So now you probably know where I'm going. It's how money derives its value. Where does the value of money come from? And this is where our friends, the gold maximalists, come in, and they're the worst offenders of not knowing the answer to that question. Well, only gold's real money, man. It's valuable, It's been valuable forever. Look, I talk about investing a lot and holding diverse assets, and I hold gold. And I hold silver in physical form. And I don't believe in this idea of, well, because I think gold is a good asset to hold, then cryptocurrency shit. I just think that's nonsensical. And I don't do it the other way around either. But gold is terrible money. Gold is terrible as money. Gold is incredibly easy to manipulate people with. Gold is difficult. So is silver, by the way. Everything I'm saying about gold here is true about silver as well. Gold is expensive to secure. Gold is expensive to transfer. Gold is complicated to transfer, to deal with small denominations for value. The most expensive thing you can make in the world of silver is a silver dime, a tenth of an ounce. It's incredibly expensive. Go try to buy it. I worked with a mint in the past. It didn't work out, but the most expensive thing we sold by the ounce was silver dimes. Why? Because it cost as much in effort and energy to make a silver dime as it does to make a silver dollar. The problem is when you buy something for $4.50 and you try to pay in silver. And, you have $5 worth. And it's not a dime now because silver's worth way more. You see, it is complicated. But even if it's silver and gold, where does it derive its value? Well, it's valuable because it's rare. Well, these are characteristics that make something likely to be adopted as money, right? It's rare. It's fungible, meaning that one unit and one unit are the same. All of these things, it's difficult to counterfeit. That's how paper bills work. They make them more and more complicated for somebody to make their own little printing press in their basement and make more of them. It's okay for the Federal Reserve to do it, but these are characteristics that make people adopt something as money. They're not in of themselves where money derives value. Money derives value from one place and one place only: the economy in which it circulates. Now, this requires confidence, it requires fungibility, it requires all those characteristics of money that we talk about, but there's plenty of things that meet those characteristics that aren't used as money in a particular economy. Because all the value in an economy comes from the people and the resources and what's done with those things in that economy. And this is why people in these developing countries, if they care about their citizens, should adopt Bitcoin as legal tender. And you could do it with another cryptocurrency. I just think, like I said, I mentioned maximalists. So a maximalist, so if you don't, and the gold maximalist is the maximalist in their world, right? That only gold is money. Well, there's maximalists in the cryptocurrency world that think only Bitcoin is a true cryptocurrency. Everything else is a shitcoin. I would call myself, I do dabble in altcoins, but I would call myself almost a maximalist lite, if that's a thing. I believe that the best cryptocurrency for the world is Bitcoin. I do have some issues with it being, basically, it can be a surveillance coin. Yeah, I understand that. We're developing more and more ways to change that. And it's why I like privacy coins like Monero and Pirate Chain, right? So, maximalist light. But when it comes to a nation that is trying to free its citizens from the clutches of the global banks, Bitcoin makes the most sense, especially with technologies like Jack Mallers' Strike, where you can spend $1 worth of Bitcoin and it doesn't have big fees. And anybody can be up and running and basically be banked with Bitcoin or dollars in seconds. It's very, very powerful. And it solves these problems that gold and silver would have. Like, imagine El Salvador's decided we're going to make gold our currency. They have the same problems they do if they're going to make dollars, US dollars their currency. And the same problems if they said we're going to make the El Salvadoran dollar and just print our own money. You still have all the same problems that the banks can fuck with your currency. And you only can acquire dollars or gold by going outside of your economy and taking your value and distributing your value in return for something you don't control. And if you use your own currency, the El Salvadoran coconut bill or whatever, then you are subject to the manipulation of the banks devaluing your currency. You also are now putting a tool into the hands of your future politicians, even if everybody that was in power at the time you did it was as pure as the driven snow and would not, inflate the currency when they shouldn't, etc. Somebody will eventually. You will get voted out. There will be a new dictator. There will be a new regime. You'll die of old age. And so sooner or later, you will have somebody have, the one ring, the ring of power, one ring to bind them, right? And that is the power of the printing press. And they will use it. So if you did manage to make your own currency work, you will have it destroyed eventually unless it is hard-coded that power cannot be wielded. It cannot be used. That's what Bitcoin does. But what Bitcoin really does for a country like El Salvador is let them build value in their economy from the circulation of value within it without exporting it. And the only thing that can do that well right now is a cryptocurrency. Again, I just think Bitcoin is the best one for the job. Here's what I mean by that. If El Salvador needs more dollars in their economy, how do they get them? Right? But if El Salvador needs more Bitcoin in their economy, how do they get it? Well, they can mine it. But they also can just begin trading and using it, and you end up with Bitcoin flowing into that economy and not going back out as it accrues value. This is the issue that a lot of people point out with Bitcoin. By the way, it's very true of gold, too. The problem with Bitcoin is people don't want to spend it. That people hold on to it. Right? Because it's deflationary, because people buy it for the purpose of it going up in price, they don't let go of it. It doesn't circulate. But why? Remember yesterday when I talked about, critical thinking and knowing why you believe what you believe, and I said the most important thing you can ask is, but why? But why? Why do people not spend Bitcoin? Because it goes up in value. Maybe. Lots of things go up in value that people let go of. Why? Well, because they buy Bitcoin. They're not paid in it. It's not the dominant form of capital that is given to them. in exchange for whatever value they produce, whether that's labor, whether that's intelligence, whether that's information. Most people in the United States are paid in dollars. If immediately you went to work for me, for instance, let's say I formed Jack Inc., and I said, anybody who works for Jack Inc. gets paid in Bitcoin. You'd start spending Bitcoin like that. Now, you might spend it by converting it to dollars, but you would spend it. See, here's the reality. Anybody who has the means to do this, right, so they make enough money to do what I'm about to explain, and enough discipline and concern for their future, will follow 3 baskets that money goes into. You have immediate use, and I consider immediate use anything that's used within a 30-day cycle of receipt. Like, there's a certain amount of money you're going to pay your electric bill with. You're watching this on the internet, you probably have an ISP, an internet service provider. You're going to pay them. Even if you get paid on the 1st of the month and that bill's not due to the 28th of the month, essentially that money is gone the second it comes in. Now, many people, unfortunately, that's all they have, right? But people that make a surplus of income, that make more than they spend because they're disciplined enough to live on a fucking budget like a fucking adult, like you should have been fucking taught in school and they didn't fucking teach you. And yes, I threw out all those F words because you fucking need to hear that if you're not doing it. Have 2 other baskets of money. And then the third basket has a lot of diversity of what could be in it, right? It could be gold, it could be silver, it could be Bitcoin, it could be stocks and bonds and mutual funds and all real estate holdings, right? That's long-term money. That's long-term money. And we'll get to that one in a second. The middle bucket of money is short-term savings. Short-term savings. We're going to take money that's in short-term savings, and that is for, the car got a flat tire, and when I look at the repair bill on it, and I look at the tread on the tires, it's time to just put 4 new tires on the car. Right? You know, if I don't do it this month, I'll have to do it next month. And instead of putting it on MasterCard or Visa, I use a short-term, like the emergency spending money. Makes sense? Like, this is what everybody that has any discipline in their life and surplus income does. So maybe that long-term money is in a 401k. Maybe it's in a self-directed IRA. Maybe it's in just stocks and bonds. Maybe it's just in a jar of bills hidden in the floor of your home. Who knows? But you still have those 3 buckets. That third bucket, people that are sane and disciplined investors do not give a flying shit when the price goes down or up or down. They don't worry about it because they know the long-term trajectory if they're disciplined investors. If you're putting long-term money into Bitcoin and you're a disciplined investor and Bitcoin cuts in half, you shouldn't worry about it. All you should be thinking is now the amount of Bitcoin that's going to go into that third bucket goes up. The quantity goes up. I'm buying more. Right? No one worries about that with all these other investments, but also we're going to worry about with Bitcoin because it's volatile. All right. The immediate spend money. The fact that Bitcoin's volatile means nothing because this is the objection I get. But what if it crashes? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. If my bill's $5 this month and I got $5 worth of Bitcoin, I pay it. The midterm money is where you might see some use of either stable coins or something like the US dollar. That midterm money would be the money that people would maybe convert. And we'd have a certain amount of stable value here. A stable value fund? Oh, you ever heard that term before? Right? In the middle, we're transacting in Bitcoin. We're saving a significant portion in Bitcoin. And we might be putting a little bit into some sort of a stabilizing basket. If I started paying you 100% in Bitcoin, you'd end up with something that would look very much like that very, very quickly. You might realize, the bears are coming for the market right now, and I want to make sure I can afford those new tires or whatever. So I'll move a couple $1,000 into Tether or US dollars or, Mexican pesos or wherever I live. But my transactional, as long as everybody accepts it. So when you make Bitcoin legal tender, by the definition of legal tender, and this is how the El Salvadoran law reads, if I am selling things in El Salvador, the government's basically telling me I have to take Bitcoin. I don't have to hold it. I don't have to ever touch it. But I have to take it. There's all kinds of ways to take it. I can take it any way I want to, and there are ways to take it, including using Mahler's system called Strike, where you're paying me in Bitcoin by scanning a QR code, and I'm getting dollars if that's what I want. But you have to take it. Now, they're not going to be sending guys out machine guns to make you do it, They're basically encouraging that. Well, imagine if that happened where you lived. I start paying you in Bitcoin. Or if you have a business, everybody's paying you in Bitcoin. Or most people are paying you in Bitcoin. And you can spend it as Bitcoin anywhere you want. What are you going to say? Well, no one's going to spend it now? Do you understand why people hold it the way that they do? Because it's part of this third bucket. That's why, because they don't get it as compensation for their work and labor, because in the United States, this is very important, Bitcoin isn't money. Bitcoin is not money in the United States. It's an asset, and hence investors in the United States treat it as an asset. And the way you know it's not money is because if it was money, you could spend it without tax consequences. I'm going to say this again for the slow children in the audience. There is no tax consequence to buying Bitcoin at all. Period. The end. Full stop. And no, they can't change that as long as it's treated as an asset. I guess the only way you could do that at some point was to come up with some form of property tax. That would be about the only way that could ever happen, and I'm not worried about it right now. So, the upshot here is if you're a developing country, if you're in El Salvador, Paraguay, Uruguay, excuse me, still dealing with this throat issue, then you want to build your economy in your country. And you need something that the European Central Bank and the American Federal Reserve, and the Canadian Federal Reserve can't fuck with. And if you have your own currency that circulates in their market, they have enough horsepower to fuck with your currency. Period. End of story. I am sorry. There's no way you can have a conventional modern currency in the federal bank, or in the global banking network of systems, forex exchangeable, etc., where it cannot be manipulated by a foreign country. China does it to the United States all the time, by the way, by tethering to our dollar and keeping a specific devaluation against the dollar to weaken their own currency so that they can afford to export cheaply. That's one example of even China can do it to us. And we are the global reserve currency, so we can do this all over the world. And since in most of these developing countries, the real currency, the real underlying valued currency is the dollar, every time we use inflation to tax our people, we tax them, at least us in our society, as prices and wages increase. And as they do things like stimulus, we get some of it. They don't. When we use inflation to tax the American people, we tax the entire developing world by sucking value out of the currency that is actually their reserve currency. The dollar is the global reserve currency. Organizations like the European Central Bank, the Canadian Central Bank, right? These organizations are large enough that they can play in this game of baseball. They can hold their own. They don't always win. They usually lose, but they only lose by a little bit. If we compare it to baseball, then El Salvador would be the Bad News Bears, and the United States would be whoever won the World Series this year. They can't play in the same stadium. They can't win. Because Bitcoin cannot be changed. Because it's ironclad, and because things like the Lightning Network and innovative technologies like Strike have taken away the whole, but I can't buy a scone and a bagel and a coffee. Yes, you can, for no fees at all. Now that that's gone, as these countries do this, it will enable them to grow their economies free of our chains that we place on them. And if you can tell me something else that'll do that, go ahead. Go ahead. I'll listen. But bring facts, logic, and reason to your argument. Because the little papusa lady that sells her pupusas on the street corner can do that with Bitcoin right now. In fact, she's doing it right now. She's there right now while you're listening to this, selling pupusas for Bitcoin. It ain't going to happen, gold maximalists with gold. And as soon as we start using gold, you understand things like where the gold built the banking system. The banks are the enemy, and you are using the tool that your enemy prefers when you use gold. Because, well, they all their money's not, they may not be backed by gold, but they have plenty of it. Because if you're going to use gold, the only way you're going to be able to use it and flow it through an economy and make it work with security is to use a custodian, a bank. How the hell do you think the Knights Templar got rich? People didn't want to walk all the way to the Holy Land with a bunch of gold on them because somebody would steal it. It was expensive and hard to secure. So they would get a note on one end, and when they got to the other end, they would be given gold back for their note. The entire global banking system was built off of that. Paper money is just the latest iteration. Debt-backed currency. It's not fiat, guys. It's debt-backed. Debt-backed currency is the latest iteration of that. It's their game. It's their weapon of choice. Cryptocurrency. It is light. It weighs nothing. It's immediately transferable. All the problems that people come up with, why you need Bitcoin Cash or whatever, they're all solved at this point. They don't exist. They don't exist. About the only one left is privacy. Privacy is going to continue to be built on top of the Bitcoin layer. And eventually, it may be as good as anything coming out of the privacy coin world. I don't know about that. But again, I'm looking at this now from being the president of Paraguay, not as Jack Spirko, crypto anarchist, right? I'm looking at from his standpoint of taking care of his people. And I said on my last video about this, the reason I think all this will happen is that people act in their best interest. And a couple of people said, well, so you're saying the United States acts in its best interest? Our government does. Our government acts in its in the best interest of its government. Well, that's if you want to be in charge of the world. And that's what we want. And that's what we've been brainwashed to want as people, to be in charge of the world leader, to control everything. Everything we do is okay. Everything everybody else does that we don't like is bad. If you're Paraguay, you have no hope of becoming that. You have no desire, no motivation. So the best thing for the government of Paraguay or Costa Rica or Belize or El Salvador or any of these countries is to empower their people. That's the best thing for those governments to do. All the problems they have relate to their nations being impoverished while we sit and extract value from their nations. Bitcoin, if you apply it properly for those nations, can become a lock that creates a recirculating value within their economies instead of an extraction. That's why. Maybe a little bit hard to grasp, but I think the more you examine it, the more you'll see that it's true. I'll be back tomorrow with something completely different on Miyagi Mornings.